You won't be very far along in your journey as a blacksmith before you want some sort of a workbench. Of course, your first workbench is your anvil. You can do a whole lot of stuff at an anvil that isn't just forging hot iron. It's a great place to do some measuring, marking, layout of your component pieces before or after you go to the forge. But it is kind of limited size. One of the reasons I like a great big anvil better than a small anvil, really a 100-pound anvil, is plenty for most of your forging work. But a bigger anvil does give you a little bit more work surface for setting a hammer, punch, chisel, things like that while you're working in the fire, and then they're right here when you come back to them. But that's pretty limited as a workbench, and you're gonna want something better. If you're working in a solid fuel forge, coal, coke, charcoal, the hearth or the table for the forge can be kind of a good workbench area. I wouldn't mount a grinder or drill press to this, but you could mount a vise to the corner of this. In fact, I've done that in the past, and I've seen a lot of other people that have a vise mounted right here. It can be really handy, although somewhat limiting. So other than a place to stage tools, I really don't use the table of the forge as much of a workbench surface. An actual purpose-built bench is really superior in most cases. Now my larger bench over in the little shop is made out of heavy timbers. These are about 4-inch thick timbers. There's two side by side just because that's what I had, but it makes a really good solid workbench. Now wood is not good for hot iron, so I wouldn't bring hot pieces over here to stage or to let cool. But this is plenty of room for your notebook, your sketch pad, a place to set your coffee while you're working. And of course you can do lots of layout work, measuring, marking, things like that here. I have a vise over here in this corner, so it's a good place for sawing, filing, all that kind of work that is very typically done at a workbench. And it really serves the purpose quite well. But there are a lot of other options for workbenches. So let's head over to the main shop and take a look at what I've got over there. And we'll see what some of the other options are you might want to look at. Over here in this shop, I think I counted 7 different things that would technically be considered workbenches. Some of them are doing exactly what you expect a big flat surface to do, and that is collect junk. Okay, honestly, calling all of this stuff junk is kind of unfair. This is all things that I'm waiting to get around to, things that I was working on and ran out of time and had to get onto something that was a higher priority, or things that I just haven't had time to tackle. This box, for instance, is full of refractory material to reline my 2-burner chili forge that I just haven't had time to deal with. I've got one of the skillet pans Housemaid makes here. They sent me this to try out. Haven't got around to that. I've got various hooks and bottle openers, a log rack, things like that over here, tools that need to be reorganized, repaired. So it just kind of collects stuff. But this is a 4x8 table, and when it's clear, you can get a lot of work done on this if you're laying out gates and small railings, things like that. A big steel work table is really handy. It's got a place to store vice grips, clamps, things like that on here. I got a little toolbox where I can put other smaller tools. And it's really a good bench, other than the fact that it's also the easiest place to stage stuff because it doesn't show up in most of the videos. Next to that, I have this little fixture table that will hold all sorts of clamps and other things for setting up welds. Really nice for fabricating. Right now, again, it's serving as a flat surface for a bunch of stuff to be piled on. This is all stuff that I moved when I built the new forge in here because it was hanging on a rack right where the forge is. And I need to get more storage built, get this stuff off of here. And then this table is more useful. This is the Fireball Dragon Wagon. It's the smallest, most affordable table they make, and it's really been nice. No, they did not sponsor me. I paid full price for the table. Then there's the Platen table. This is a relatively new addition to the shop. Been in here for less than 2 years, I think. But one of those things that I'm really glad I finally broke down and bought. I wish I had had it years sooner. It's a relatively small table. This one's 2.5 feet by 5 feet, and it fits in here. I can work all the way around it. The problem with the big 4x8 table is I can only get to one side. I can't really work around the ends or the back at all, so it's a little bit big for this small shop. A 4x8 table you can walk all the way around is wonderful. In If I had room for two 5x5 platens, which is a common size, I would absolutely do that because they are so useful. And you can sometimes find those used at a pretty good deal if you have a way to move a cast iron tabletop that weighs a full ton. This one is about 1,000 pounds with the legs. It's a little bit thinner top, but it's cast iron. You can weld on it, you can put hot material on it, and you can do a fair amount of hammering on it. Not a substitute for an anvil, but for straightening, bending, assembly, all that kind of stuff. This is an absolutely wonderful table, and I'm really glad to have it in the shop. Currently, we've got a post vise mounted to one end. That just bolts through the square holes on the top of the platen, and it would take me about 5 minutes to move that if I needed an unencumbered top. So it's real easy to bolt things down and move things back off. It's a very versatile workbench if you got room for it. Now in this outer room of the shop, I've got two benches. I've got a old thing that I bought years ago that's kind of handy. It's a Sears Craftsman metal bench. Got a particle board top that's covered with sheet metal. Not bad. The drawers are kind of nice to have, but as those things go, it's probably about the cheapest version of it you'll ever find, and I don't really use it for much. I've got a wire wheel mounted to one end, a dental lathe, which is a small, lower speed grinder that'll take a lot of the burrs that you would use in a die grinder. Really a handy tool, and that's about all that gets used for, plus more stuff just piled up on top of it because I didn't have any other place for the stuff. As workbenches go, it's more useful as a set of drawers than it is an actual workbench. I have another big wooden bench back here. This is made up out of 2x8s and 4x4 or 4x6 posts. It's a big, heavy wooden bench. Don't do any hot work on this, but I do have my grinder set on this, my two 2x72 belt grinders. And a workbench is a great place to mount belt grinders. A separate stand isn't bad, but a workbench works out well. You got a place to set the things you're working on, place to stage wheels and abrasives, things like that. So it's a pretty functional thing and pretty economical to build. A lot of these wooden benches are built out of things that were leftovers from other projects, so I didn't have to go out of pocket very much to build these benches. And that brings us to the benches you see most often here at Black Bear Forge. The one that we sit at and talk about the current project is a steel bench, 1/2 inch thick top. It's about 3 foot by 5 foot. I've got a great big vise mounted to the end. Vise is a little overkill on this bench, but the bench isn't moving around, so it hasn't been a problem. This is a really good sized bench. It's probably the oldest bench I have. I made this probably 25 years ago, and it has been in several different shops. It's still a practical bench. It's got a couple of shelves below it to put things on. One of those shelves has a little mid box, so it's a toolbox with drawers but no flip up lids. So you don't have to worry about being able to get to the top of the box. And that's a great place to store tape measures and rulers, squares, all of that kind of stuff that you need at a bench. I probably spend more time at this bench than any of the others. I do a lot of layout here. This is where my notebook tends to live if I'm taking notes during the day and need to keep track of what I'm doing. Again, all my measuring and marking stuff is over at this bench, so naturally, if I need to measure or mark something, this is where I come. The bench behind me is another wooden workbench, again, made out of leftover 2x8s from another project. That one's 2 layers thick, so it's a good solid bench. I've had vices mounted to that bench in the past, but I always ended up coming back to the vise mounted on this bench just out of habit, and because it's got a little bit more space around it, I'm working towards the shop instead of staring at the wall behind the bench. It doesn't really affect the work any, but it's kind of nice to see the bigger area instead of just staring at that wall. But that other bench does have the portaband sitting on it. In the past, I've had a benchtop drill press sitting on it, and it would be appropriate for a lot of benchtop tools. So it's a very handy bench. Lots of parts get staged there. If I'm working on something and I need to have parts in various stages of the process, like making batches of hooks, bottle openers, holdfasts, all that kind of stuff. That kind of stuff frequently gets staged there. So quite often it's taken up with a bunch of stuff because it's a big flat horizontal surface, and it's just kind of what that bench does. A lot of people argue you shouldn't have too many benches because they do tend to collect stuff. But what are you going to do with that stuff if you don't have a bench? Put it all in 5-gallon buckets where you can't see it? Throw it on the floor where you got to trip over it? Personally, I'd rather have it up at a height and out where I can see it, and hopefully I'll deal with some of that stuff later. So if you don't have a workbench in your setup right now, you probably want to think about it. 2 foot by 4 foot is probably a good starter size if you're just building a bench, you got a small shop. 3 by 5 is better. 4 by 8 is great if you can work around it, but you can't reach all the way across a 4 by 8 table like mine is up against the wall. So the stuff in the back just kind of gets forgotten about, and it's really easy to push things off the back of it where they end up against the wall under the bench where you got to get down on your hands and knees and crawl under the bench to get it. So if you're building or buying a bench, think about the size, think about your shop layout. There are so many options. No 2 shops need the exact same bench. Build whatever suits your purposes. But one way or the other, I hope you have time in your day to get out to your shop, make something, workbench, forge a project, doesn't matter. Have fun, stay safe, wear your safety glasses. We'll see you for the next video.